Well, hello again. This is Jeffrey Cranford with Links, and back with Tracy Hanson again. We're going to continue this series on thinking like a pro. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. First question on this segment will be this: what would provoke us to want to take that next step? Now, maybe you've just gotten a taste of something good in golf. Maybe you played in a little partnership tournament and you said, wow, I think I could advance beyond where I am. I think that happens a little bit in the spiritual walk, Tracy, and if we start to spend a little time in the Word, and then we come across Paul's admonition in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and he says this. He says, therefore we are ambassadors for Christ, as though God were entreating through us. We beg you on behalf of Christ to be reconciled to God. Ambassadors. Now that's kind of like, that's a whole nother realm than, well, I go to such and such church and I attend there and I kind of hope I'm saved. I mean, that's like, no, I become an ambassador. I become a representative of Jesus and the kingdom. But to get to that ambassadorship, there's got to be very purposeful practice. You don't just, you've got to be prepared. How does that translate into the golf world? I mean, that preparation, that practicing. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think, for a long time as I was growing as a golfer, I would go out and beat balls. I remember in college, I would hit like 300 golf balls a day. But they all weren't with really specific purpose behind them. Right. Sometimes it was just to get it done.
Right.
And so the older I got as a golfer and the longer I was on tour, my body was wearing out a little bit, and I couldn't practice as long, and so I had to learn how to practice with purpose.
Yeah.
And so every time I was on the range or on the putting green or in the sand bunker, wherever I was practicing or on the course, there was much more specific purpose that I was looking to improve or to gain a better knowledge of my golf swing.
Right.
So it was very specific.
So you had a plan.
I had a plan, and it was much more efficient and conserved a lot of energy. I
was with one of our dear friends, Jeff Gove, who's played the tour for many years, and his friend Sean, who's at the Grand down here in San Diego. He said he went and they had Greg Norman come into the Grand, and Greg was talking about this and that, and they were saying, well, Greg, why don't you go back and play the Champions Tour? And Greg says, I don't want to spend the time that it necessitates to go back and compete at that level. He said, when I was the best player in the world, and he was for many, many weeks, not as many as Tiger was, but up until that point, I think he had been on the world #1 list for a long time. He said, at the peak of my career, I was practicing, these are his words, close to 10 hours a day, 70% on the short game. Are you kidding me? 7 hours a day? I'm sure he didn't do that 7 days a week, but his plan was very specific and very detailed, and I'm sure he had broken it down. Do we have that same kind of thing as it relates to this, or do we just kind of, I listen to this guy a little bit or hear a sermon, but we don't really think about it deeply? You think there's some truth to that as it relates to our spiritual walk?
For sure. And I've recognized it as a writer for the daily devotions, that if I want to write something twice a week, I have to be in the Word and very specifically listening for places where God is speaking to me that I can then share with other people.
Right.
And so through little things like that, I am an ambassador for Christ. And sometimes it's not always what we say, but even just how we act and how we treat people and the gratitude that we live in the midst of a messy life and struggling circumstances.
And I think that's exactly what Jesus was talking about. He had two encounters. He's making a conversation about the Holy Spirit in John 7 and then John 4. He's saying, look, if you'll drink this water, not only will you never thirst again, and then he began to talk about these rivers of living water come out of you. When you finally push past the point of my spiritual life is all about my spiritual comfort, my spiritual growth, if you can push beyond that and get into an idea of I'm going to be competitive, I'm going to go in and I'm going to begin to take spiritual strongholds and bring them down and see people released, and it's no longer about me, it's about the people around me. You can't practice like you used to if you practiced at all. You can't stay a 15 handicap in the kingdom of heaven. You have to press on to maturity. Let's talk a little bit about that on the next series, Tracy. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of those strongholds, both in golf, maybe mental or things, and then in the spiritual realm as well.
Sounds good.